The purpose of our webinar today is to really go deep into some of the subscription features. We have a number of subscribers on the call right now, and then other folks who are interested in learning more about the subscriptions. It's sort of, giving a preview of it to those folks, but for the subscribers, hopefully this will be a nice kind of refresher introductory tutorial on some of the managing features of the system. And so just to give you an idea of what I hope to cover today, first and most important thing is administrator access. So if you have subscribed to the system, you will have the ability to identify as many administrators of the system within your school or school district as you'd like. And I want to be able to show you all the features that you'll have access to as an administrator, so you have an idea of what that looks like. And then also the process for assigning new administrators, because that's something that has definitely come up, people want to know about. So we'll cover some of that. We'll talk about uploading users and the different ways that you can get users into the system and the options that we give you. We'll go really deep into that. We'll talk about the lesson plans that are currently in the system. There's a number of CEW standard aligned lesson plans that are already uploaded. There'll be more being added over the next couple of months for the beginning of the next school year. And each of the lesson plans that's in the system right now actually come with evidence creation. So the idea being that as you go through these lesson plans or assign them, that built in is the ability to create evidence that you'll be able to use for the career readiness indicator. We'll talk about tagging. We added a feature fairly recently which allows, we already had the ability for students to store files or for you to store files on students' behalf in the system. What we're doing now is allowing you to tag those files as evidence. So that will allow us to then create a report that'll tell you, the numbers of evidence that you have for each student in the system. I'll go into that system in detail. Then we'll show you the Local Opportunities Network and give you an idea of what that looks like. That's for work-based learning and other ways in which you're connecting students with local companies and mentorships, apprenticeships, job shadows, even career fairs, those kinds of things. And I'll give you an idea of what that looks like, and then some other sort of tips and tricks. So that's kind of the idea of what we'll be covering. If anyone has any questions or wants to pipe in, feel free to do so in the chat window. Though I will be sharing screen, so it's possible I won't see it right away. But you could also go off mute and just kind of pipe in there as well. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen and we're going to dive in. We talked about the agenda already. All right, so let me kind of go through just top line for the newcomers on the call who are still kind of looking at this as an upgrade and a possibility of something they might consider for their district or school. So just as some background, the state of Pennsylvania has subscribed to the Pennsylvania CareerZone, a system to help with career readiness, and we've got a number of activities. We've had another webinar which went to all of the sort of features and benefits of this system for students. The subscription is actually more for the administrative level of what you all are doing. This is so that you can capture evidence for the career readiness indicator, that you can monitor student activity on the system, that you can have as many administrators as you want in the system, that you can run the kinds of reports that we'll be showing, and a couple other things as well, including the single sign-on capability with Google or Microsoft, and actually we now include Clever too, if that's something that folks are interested in. So I wanted to kind of summarize that for you. We've got our baseline pricing. If you're interested and you want to, after all this conversation and call, want to sort of get a quote for your district, reach out. And what you see on the screen right now is sort of a starting point for how we price the system. And we can talk about more of that later, but I want to give you an idea of what your experience will be when you subscribe, and for subscribers, what you've probably already seen. The very first thing that happens when you do subscribe to the system is we will identify a first administrator in the system. And that first administrator is going to basically fill out a form that's going to tell us a couple of the key things that administrator is going to want for their school or district to kind of set the tone. So what they're going to first do is identify, does the district have a single sign-on service, like a Google or a Microsoft 365 or Clever? Because if they do, it makes signing on a lot easier, and I'll show you what that looks like in a second. If you don't, that's fine too, because we've got a username and password system, and we've got the ability for administrators to change passwords if a student loses passwords. So you've got options, I think, is the message. As you look down the questions here, you'll see also that you have the option. The question is, do you want students or teachers to be able to create their own accounts, or would you like to restrict the system so that only users that you create can access it? So that's one thing that you can do. You can be the sort of central manager of all access to the system. That's a definite possibility. And you could also make it so that students can create accounts on their own. And the other thing you can do is, if you do use a single sign-on, like a Google, for instance, you can make that the only way that people can sign on. So that way they're not creating separate usernames and passwords, and you don't have to worry about people having multiple accounts. Though we would help you with that. If that, in the event that that did happen, we could help you with account deletion and that sort of thing. So just as a heads up, this is the very first thing that happens. And once you've been identified as an administrator, when you sign in, will click the sign in button. In this case, we're going to sign in with Google. Actually, in this case, I'm not going to sign in with Google because I want to show you this. This is a mock admin account that I wanted to use, not my own admin account. So I'm going to sign in with this mock admin account. And Stella, in this case, is an administrator in the system. And as an administrator with the system, you are going to have a Manage tab. So when you open up the Manage tab, you're going to see a lot of options that, first of all, no student ever sees. And at the moment, no other teacher or administrator is going to see. The first administrator is the first person who's going to see all this stuff. And you can actually go and look at all your users that are in the system by clicking on Manage Users. You click Manage Users, you'll see a big list of all the students who are in the system. Now, let's use an example. Let's pretend that Jonas here was actually a teacher or someone I wanted to identify as an administrator. So this would be the scenario of a second administrator that you're adding to the system. You would click the blue pencil, you would edit the user, and in this case, you would change the access from student to administrator, all right? And once you've done that, you click Save, and now that person has now been switched from student status to administrator status. So now that person sees the Manage tab, and you can do that essentially as many times as you want for as many teachers or counselors that you want to have administrative or manager access. Let me actually now explain the difference between an administrator and a manager. An administrator within a school or district is going to have every option that you see here, all the data maintenance stuff, all the system activity stuff, all the user management stuff. The manager is only going to see manage users and manage lessons. The manager, think of that more as a teacher of maybe an individual classroom who you want to monitor the students in that classroom, but you don't necessarily want or need them to be doing other stuff in the system that we'll be going into more detail in this session about. Things like creating an announcement for your school district that appears on the Pennsylvania CareerZone's homepage, or managing resources or FAQs or things like that. So that's really the big difference between a manager and an administrator. The administrator gets all the stuff. The manager has sort of a more limited scope just so that person can focus on their students, as an example. Okay, so that's a very key thing. Now, the other things that you'll see on this page, we're going to get into with a lot more detail, but suffice it to say that everything under the system activity side, that's all the kind of nitty-gritty reports of user creation and logins, occupations viewed, colleges viewed. If you want to see things in aggregate across your system, that's where you're going to do it, and you can always play around and take a look at what those individual reports look like. Data maintenance is where a district or school is going to really add customizations to the system, where they're going to make the system reflect what's happening within the districts. For instance, they could include a calendar, or they could send surveys out to students. They can even create a CMS page, and we'll talk about that, or announcements. So we're going to get to some of this in today's call, but think about data maintenance as the section to sort of sprinkle in some of your district or school's own magic into the Pennsylvania CareerZone site so that students are able to see the things that you want to promote. But we are starting with managing users, and we're imagining that we are an administrator who's come in for the first time, and let's pretend for a moment that we don't actually have 109 mock students in the system, but instead that we're ready to think about uploading students. The very first thing that you're going to want to do is to click this cloud icon with a little arrow that faces up. It's at the bottom of the screen, and it asks you the question, what do you want to import? Do you want to import users or group assignments? You're always going to start with users, so bring your users in first before you think about group assignments. And when you do users, you're going to see all of the optional fields that can be created in an Excel. Now we include a template for you, so it's not like you have to build out the template. If you click here, you'll be able to pull up a template where you can export. You would export your data from your SIS, and then you could use this template to get it ready for upload into the system. Some of these things you may not need. If you have an SSO, if you're using like Google, for instance, you don't need a username and password necessarily, but you may still want to have your email address, your first name, your last name, etc. The reason, say, you want an email address is because, say, you're going to send a message within the system. Student can receive any message you send them within the Pennsylvania CareerZone, but if you have your email address, they have the option to have a message that's sent also connect to their personal email address. So those are the kinds of things that you can decide for yourself individually. Maybe the most important thing about this uploading process is, our team and myself, we're kind of here to help you with this. If you create a file and you want to, say, first make sure that you've got everything structured the right way, you can share that with us securely and we can confirm that for you. Or if you have any hiccups or problems in the upload, we're happy to help you do that. But that's the very first thing that you're going to do. And one thing I'll point out here is that we, at the very end, allow you to indicate if a user is a manager or administrator. So you don't simply need to upload just the students who are going to be on the system. You could upload all the teachers as well, indicate if they're a manager or administrator, and then you don't need to worry about going in and changing their status within their profile, as I showed you before. So that's certainly an option. So that's the manage users section and uploading new users. The process for uploading groups is very, very similar. And let's talk about groups for a second. For anyone who's not as familiar, a lot of you are looking to use the system to essentially look at cohorts, whether it is by the class year, the seniors, the juniors, the freshmen, et cetera, the 8th graders, or maybe you actually want to organize things by individual counselors, or maybe you have some other way that you're organizing cohorts within your district or school. We want to give you a bunch of options for that. And the first thing I'll point out is that, we have seen certain districts have created groups around graduation years. You actually don't need to do that. You actually have this as a default filter in the system. If you click on graduation year, you can select the graduation year and it will pull up the students in that graduation year. So if I put in 2022, okay, there's none, I have none in my mock group there, but if I click it back, then it'll go back to all the students who are there. So you can filter by graduation year. You can filter by the schools that you have inside the system as a school district, the user type. So if you want to just look at the administrators, managers, students, you can do that. When they were created. And then I'll point out here that if you want to look for an individual student, you can start typing in their name at the top. I'll type in Jost. There is Jost. I can find Jost, and if I want, I can look at their profile. I can look at reports about their activity in the system with this view profile report. So it's just something to bear in mind. So you can look up an individual student, or I can instead start typing in a group name, so click Robert's group, and now I would see the people who are in Robert's group, right? So that's the sort of search at the top, is to allow you to look for individual students or groups. So that's just something to bear in mind, and that's at the very top. In terms of other aspects of user management, you can directly add a student to a group. Oops, that went by a little fast. What was that? Sorry about that. If I wanted to add Marina to Robert's group, I could start typing in Robert's group here, and oops, apostrophe, and then click, and now that individual student is part of the group. So you can do this in bulk using the upload and go group assignments and use the template that we have for you here and create groups that way, or you can add them one at a time. So that's both uploading users and uploading groups within the system. So I'm going to pop out, look at the Hangout just to make sure I don't have any questions at the moment. And in the chat, I'll get a few more people. Looking at chat, doesn't look like any questions are in chat at the moment, so I will return to the presentation. Okay, so that is managing users. I want to now talk a little bit about the lesson plans and managing lessons. So if I hover over manage and I go to manage lessons as an administrator on the subscription site, you are going to see at first bunch of CEW standard aligned lesson plans that you can actually go ahead right now and use. We've got one for 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade, and then we've got several here for 7th grade to higher ed. And that's going to change over the summer. Is you'll see them year by year: 7th grade, 8th grade, 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, 12th grade. But for now, if you're in a bind and you want to just generate evidence before the end of the school year, you can use these lesson plans for that range of students depending on who you're working with. So let's actually look at one of these, and let's look at the 7th grade lesson, 7th grade to higher ed. Who am I? Know who you are to know where you're going lesson plan. And this falls under the exploration and development category of the PA standard 13.1.11. If I click on actions and I click on learn, this is a teacher or administrator view of the lesson that's been created. It gives you a summary of what the lesson's all about, the standards that it's aligned to, the objective for the student, the language that's used inside the lesson that's critical, the lesson activities that you're going to be running the students through. So I would differentiate here between activities, which is sort of more part of how that lesson is going to be taught, from the evidence, which is going to be created, which you can think of more as the end output. Right, so that comes sort of towards the end. As you'll scroll down, you sort of read through the lesson activities as your step-by-step of what you would do in this individual lesson, down to asking the students to bookmark occupations within the system, have them create an entry or a journal entry about the occupations they want to explore further, and so on and so forth. And then we also give you suggestions for lesson enhancements, learning outcomes, and then at the very bottom you see the evidence that is created as a result of the lesson plan. If you want to see the activities that the student and what the student's going to see, you would click on actions, click on preview, and here you would see this is what the student actually would see. So this is a description of what the student would read. The student reads, the happiest professionals tend to be those working in jobs that align to their interests, temperament, and goals. In this lesson, you'll begin to be more aware of how your own personal characteristics and interests may affect your choice of careers, and so on and so forth. So basically, we're defining for the student what they're trying to do here and what they're trying to get out of this. And then we're going to give them various tasks. So task 1 is a quick assessment. Task 2 is a short essay about the quick assessment. So these things are generally saved in the system as evidence, and so we'll indicate when that's the case. So as you go through here, that's sort of the idea. Now that is all sort of a description for those of you who are looking to kind of pull some lesson plans off the shelf and get evidence generated in sort of an automated way. Though we recognize that a lot of you actually have very sort of advanced career readiness curriculums already in place that you're really just trying to merge with this system and kind of bring in. And there's a couple ways that you can do that. The first way that we're going to talk about today is actually creating your own lesson plan. So if you click create a lesson, you can, within these next couple of screens, define your lesson that you've already created. You give it a name, you give it the educator description. Now this is what your fellow educators are going to see. That's everything that I showed at the first, which is sort of defining the lesson, the activities, etc., and then the evidence can be generated. Then you fill in the student description. That's what the students are going to see. You have your minimum suggested grade level where you could start assigning something like this, and then the maximum here as well. And then you can make it a shared lesson plan across your system as well, so other teachers and educators can use it. Once you've saved that, the next screen is going to take you to the tasks that you assign. And the key thing that I'll point out about tasks is that you can assign both tasks within the Pennsylvania CareerZone, but you can also assign tasks that are of your own making. Right, and so you could ask a student to write a particular essay, and they could write that using our journals within the system, or they could write that on a Word document or something. Now let's imagine, for instance, that a student has created a document somewhere else outside of the system, but you want to make sure that that document is saved within the Pennsylvania CareerZone as evidence, so it can be essentially recorded as evidence and be part of the reports that you're rolling up. So that's where we go into file management, and I'm going to show you a little bit of what that looks like. So let's go back to manage users, and I'm going to go and I'm going to look for that mock student Jost. I'll pull him up. And when I pull him up and I click on his blue pencil, I, as the administrator, have this option to manage files. I click manage files, and now I can see that for Jost, and I did this before our webinar today, I uploaded a presentation. All right, so this is now saved in his Manage Files section, and I, as the administrator, have tagged it as 8th grade evidence. Now, I could tag it as any grade level evidence. That's one option. I could also tag it as, you know, Mr. Door evidence. You know, you could call it anything you want, really, if you want to, right? The reason we have the fixed tags of grade 8 or grade 9 or grade 10, 11, etc., is because we're going to give you reports that report on those tags in specific. But if you have other tags, you can do those as well, and we can report on those as well. So it's just something to bear in mind. So there's two options here. One is that you can upload the file on the student's behalf, or the student can upload it themselves. Now, students can't tag their own files, but if you want a file that they've uploaded to have something like, say, the 8th grade tag, just ask them to include in the name of their file the phrase, you know, 8th grade evidence or 9th grade evidence or 10th grade evidence, and so on and so forth. And then the system will know that the file that's being uploaded is intended to be evidence, and that way you'd avoid having to add the tag yourself. So just a feature of, you know, managing files and then adding tags to those files. So that's sort of a short summary of tagging and what that looks like there. But again, just to kind of review, we would go, if we want to add a tag to a file that a student's uploaded, or if we're uploading it ourselves, we go to that blue pencil, we manage files, and then here we are. And we can, you know, we can choose a file and upload it, or we can take a file that's already been uploaded and add tags in this dropdown. Okay, so that's managing files. So now you've got sort of two ways that the system is sort of thinking about and analyzing evidence. One way is through lesson plans or activities that happen within the system, and another is with outside assignments that you might have created on your own. You just want to basically use the system as a file storage and tracking mechanism, which hopefully, as you can see today, you can do. So now if I'm within sort of the big aggregate, you know, I'm looking at all the users and groups, now I want to start understanding, okay, one piece of evidence that I have being used across the board for, let's pretend we're looking at 109 juniors right now. We're not, but let's just say we are. I would run a dashboard report to see all the activities in the system, or I could run an interest profiler report, because I knew that I had all my juniors were doing the interest profiler to be a piece of evidence for them within the system, and I can actually go down and look at all the students. I can actually see the results if they have results to the system, where I can see that they've started or not started it. So there are various ways to look in aggregate at the students within a cohort or overall to see if they've completed an individual activity, or if you want to look across all activities in the system, that's where you'd run the dashboard report, and you've got all of these reports that you can actually see what the status is. The green dot tells you that that particular activity has been completed. A hash mark tells you that it has not been completed. And you can export this up here to CSV or XLS, or you can print it as well. So when comes down to time to start analyzing if students completed things, you know, we're going to be adding a host of reports over the summer, and I'll be sending updates via email to tell you about those, and we'll do some office hours and probably another webinar to kind of introduce you to those. But for now, there's quite a bit you can do. You can run these aggregate reports about activities within the system, and of course, you can look at individual students' profile reports to know and see what they've done. Something else I wanted to mention, if I'm looking at Joss again, let's take a look at his individual profile. If I go to this gray document button and click View Profile Report, this is going to give me a deep dive into that student's activity in the system. So here it tells me that Joss has not completed the interest profiler, but he did do the skills profiler, the work importance profiler. It shows me actually the outputs and the scores that he had within that. It shows me all of his occupation matches. These are all the things that he matched to in his exploration and based off of his assessments. As I keep scrolling down, I can see all the occupations and opportunities that he flagged as being of interest. So if I'm having a meeting or a conversation with him, I've got a really good idea of what he's interested in. I can look at his lesson plans. So if I assigned him a sophomore career path, for instance, I can see that he's halfway through. He hasn't totally finished it yet, but he's on his way. But he did do this one, the 11th grade career evidence, you know, and don't mind the names. This is all fake just for demonstration. But this is what you would see for an individual student if you want to see kind of the progress they're making. You can see the journals that the individual has kept in the system. Hopefully your students will have longer than one sentence journals. And then as you scroll down, you can see the budgets that they've kept. And then finally at the very bottom, a list of all the files along with the tags that come with each of those files. All right, so anything and everything that you want to see about an individual student is going to be in the profile report. The student can run his own profile report, right? So that's possible to do from the student's page, but as the administrator, you can run it. Again, you click that gray button, you view profile report, and if you want, you can save this as a PDF to the user's files, and you could identify it itself as evidence if you wanted to, because there's multiple things that are captured here. So just something to bear in mind. If you're a counselor and you're having a meeting with an individual student, it gives you the capability to go pretty deep into all of that. Okay, I've said a lot, so let me go back into the Hangout, make sure and look at the chat for a second. All right, so if you see a few questions, so let me go through these. Bethany asked, my coworker's trying to get in, and are you able to let them in? Okay, that's something I probably failed to do because I was chatting. I didn't succeed, but we'll share. If they weren't able to get in, I will share the recording afterwards. So I would apologize for that. Lesson plans for K2. So we created lesson plans for up the ladder, and I can show you those in a moment that I do believe would work for first grade and second grade. Kindergarten may be a little young for this, but we'll talk about it in a second. And then what kinds of file extensions can be uploaded. We don't restrict the types of files that you can use. People have uploaded Excels, PDFs, Word documents, you name it. So if there's a need as far as file storage and you're not able to upload it, please ping us and let us know, and then we'll get in and fix that. And we're also, even though we suggest a kind of limitation on storage for this first year that we're rolling out the subscription in Pennsylvania, we're not limiting you. So we would encourage you to ask your students, don't upload their iTunes library, but if they've got something that's related to career readiness and they want to save it in here, by all means, they should feel free to do so. Okay, so let me look and show you a little bit of these lesson plans for the younger students really quickly. And also point out that the lessons that we have in here right now is by no means exhaustive. We're going to be adding more lesson plans. This is just what you have at this moment in time. We wanted to make sure we had some in here because some of you were kind of getting onto the subscription system and wanting to crank out evidence right before the end of the year, and we wanted to give you some stuff to work with for that. But more will be added over the next few months. The lessons that we have in here, third grade, fourth grade, fifth grade, they could technically be used for younger students. So introducing careers as an example is something that you could follow for a younger student. If I hover over actions, you look at learn. This is a lesson is something that, the teacher guides this. It's not like the student is going to have to read a lesson description here. And we give you the sort of in-class activities about opening up the ladder system and showing students around, and I can give you a quick glimpse at that as well, and then the evidence that is going to be generated. So the lessons the grade levels that are in here are suggested grade levels, but you could certainly assign them. And that's kind of an important thing too. If you want to assign a lesson, you don't actually assign the lesson directly from this creation of a lesson plan interface. You go back to your manage users file link, and you find the student, like let's find Jost. We'll use Jost as our example again. And in this case, what we would do is we would hover over this little book. This is our lesson plan book. We hover on that. We find the lesson that we want to assign to Jost. We click the plus button, all right, because it says confirm you wish to assign that to Jost. I click OK, and now that lesson has been assigned to Jost, and he'll get a notification about it. I can do that in aggregate as well. I just did that for one individual, but if I had all of my students in here and I wanted to assign all of them a lesson, I would follow the same process. click the plus button. Now it's going to say, do you want to assign this to 109 selected users? I'm going to say cancel here, but that's how you would do that. So that's how you assign it. Now, assigning a lesson to a younger student, maybe not necessary, because they're not going to be in the system seeing these notifications. It's more, the lesson plans that you see for like a third grader, it's more about what should the teacher do in the class, and then what sorts of activities are you guiding them through. And just a refresh, if you are working with younger students, to find Up the Ladder, there's a couple ways to get to it. You can go to the Educator's Corner, and you'll find a link to Up the Ladder right here, to click on that. And the other place you can find it is if you go to Explore, and under Occupations, you see Up the Ladder, and this will take you to the Up the Ladder interface, and this has all the activities that are designed around the younger students. We're not going to spend a whole lot of time on Up the Ladder, but the key thing to point out about Up the Ladder and what we're trying to do with this system is that it's introducing career readiness to the younger student in a sort of gamified environment that's kind of fun for them to play. They create a badge, as you can see here. They ultimately are going to try to explore their way to promotions. So the more they explore, the more points they get. They earn these badges as they move along. And as they get promoted, more opportunities of different things to explore opens up to them, including like a budget tool, presentation module, etc. But they have their own interest profiler in here as well. If I click on my interests, you can see that what we do for younger kids is a little different what we do for older kids. We give them a couple of occupations to compare. Would you rather be kind of in a sciencey lab, or would you rather kind of build and repair things? And this younger child is going to kind of make decisions based off of their emotional response to these images, right? So that's how we do interest in Up the Ladder. So that's a quick preview of that, and we do have lessons that align to activities within the system for Up the Ladder. Go back and make sure there's not some follow-up on that question. Will there be a printable version with all of these features and directions? So we do have materials that can be printed that are within the resources, within the user's guide, in the Educator's Corner, and we'll be actually working on new materials as we go through a redesign over the summer. So if you need something near term, you can find stuff, but we'll be refreshing it over the next several months, just so you know. And then to piggyback on the question, media, Google, Apple programs too. Yeah, in terms of files, like I said, if you hit a hiccup of a file that you'd like to upload and you can't, we will accommodate it and make it so you can upload it. We want you to be able to save the files in here that are pertinent to your evidence generation and storage. And that's the point of what we're trying to do here. So that's something that would be top of mind for us, okay? All right, so I want to spend a little bit of time now back in the Manage tab, and we're going to start with this idea of local opportunities, because you will see this as an administrator and you may be wondering what it is. Now, it's a relatively new feature that we've rolled out as part of the CareerZone. We've rolled it out first in California, and now it's coming to Pennsylvania. When you see Manage Local Opportunities, you click there, and as an administrator, you can add one of the local opportunities here. So if you choose, is it a company, is it education and training, is it an institution, you would type in the name, and then you start to fill in a profile. But I want to show you what it actually looks like. So if I click here, I'm going to go to, this is Humboldt County, California's deployment, and they've been doing a lot of work on their local opportunities recently. So it's a really nice best-in-class example, and so I thought I'd show you what it looked like. So in their case, their program, and it's a work-based learning program. They're trying to get their kids out experiencing what it's like to be in the world of work in the various companies and opportunities that surround them in Humboldt County. And they describe their program with a sort of program profile, at work program, and they define what the program is for their particular county, and that's a county-wide program. You might just have a district-wide program or a school-wide program. They define it, and then they've also included, because all of this content is totally customizable, they've included some surveys and ways for students to record participation, because they want to, at the end of the day, roll up reports that shows how many students participated in what work-based learning opportunities, and how many companies did the same, and how many educators did that. So they've got the ability to record participation as an example, and they use their own sort of home profile as the way to do that. So that's just something to bear in mind, and probably a good place to start. If you have a work-based learning sort of program, it's probably a good idea to create a profile for it. Now, you can see when I click on View All, you can see that in Humboldt County, there's a number of local opportunities that have been uploaded to the system, 112 in total. And you can filter it by the sector, by the location, by the type of involvement. So if it's a field trip host or job shadow or mentoring, you can actually narrow down the list according to those things. And if I open up one of these opportunities, for instance, let's look at LACO. If I open up the LACO Associates opportunity, you can see their profile, and their profile is also customizable. You can have sort of, you can have them enter information about themselves as a company. You can have them include contact information, or you may determine that you don't want them to include contact information because you want any interface with a local company to be going through a central administrator. Maybe it's you, maybe it's one of your colleagues. But you can also have them show what industries they employ in. So in LACO's example, they employ civil engineers, and I'm going to click on that, and we'll go to the civil engineer's occupational profile. What's really interesting and cool about uploading these local opportunities is once you've done it, and a student is looking at an occupation profile. So say I'm a kid who's really interested in being a civil engineer. I'm learning all about it. I'm learning about the preparation that's required, the wages, the job outlook, etc. And as I scroll down, I actually also see that there's companies employing this occupation near me. And that's LACO Associates, that's SHN Engineers. And so I'm now able to start really imagining, taking this out of the theory of liking a certain occupation, but seeing that, oh my gosh, like there's a company nearby that employs civil engineers, and maybe they also have some work-based learning opportunities for juniors and seniors. So that's the kind of thing that we're trying to do with the work-based learning and the local opportunities network. And you can see that what's really special about the system is that the way to discover these opportunities is twofold. I mean, you can go directly to the local opportunities section of your local deployment, or serendipitously, as you're exploring as a student various occupations, you can find those local opportunities on an occupational profile. We call that bidirectional linkage, and it's been really cool. It works out really well for students who are exploring within a given system. So I'll pause there and just take another look at chat. Okay, so we can definitely send out more information on Up the Ladder. I'll include that as a follow-up after the recording. I've got a full recording on Up the Ladder to give you a walkthrough on that. So I'll include that in my follow-ups. Okay, so that's the local opportunity network, and where we wanted to sort of finish our time today is with some of the other sort of tips and tricks within the system. And this all comes down to sort of data maintenance and some things that are easy to miss, and we don't want you to miss them because they're pretty cool. So first things first, manage resources. What's that? Well, if you go over the side tab and you see branch out, it says additional resources, and I click there, you can see right now that there's no resources found because in this sort of local demo deployment of the system, we haven't added any resources. But if you wanted to add resources specific to your school or district, or just links that are part of other programs that you're doing, you can populate this page, this branch out page with any resources that you'd like, and you do that by managing resources. You click on Manage Resources, and then you can create a new resource, etc. So that's where you would do that. The other thing is manage FAQ. If you want to, within help support, we have a whole bunch of, we've got the user's guides and frequently asked questions. You can add topics here if there's some specifically that you want to help other teachers or students with. You have the option to do that. Managing announcements is really cool. If you've got something big coming up, maybe it's a job fair or something like that, you can add a new announcement. I could, I name my announcement. I say job fair is coming, and I will broadcast that on my homepage. I'm going to have it expire tomorrow, but I'm going to delete it right now. Job fair is coming, and I'm going to create the announcement. So now, when I've done that, as a student, when I go to the Pennsylvania CareerZone and I go to my local deployment, I'm going to see the announcement that you created. So you can actually broadcast that right on the homepage, and I can close it. So that's where you manage announcements. So that's something you can do. I'll delete that. look at these other options. I've talked to different districts and other subscribers around the state, and some of them have some really amazing programs already in place, different things that they're doing for career readiness. And they have asked me, well, should we link to them using resources, or are there other options? Well, there are other options. You can manage CMS. So you could literally create a page within the system that is all about really anything you want. And we've got some examples that you see on the screen of different pages that have been created by other customers. But if you create a new page, you sort of follow the templates as you move along, and you're able to create a page where you go to your local deployment.pacareerzone.org/ and then you name your page, and the student's able to get there, and that can be a link that you share out. So again, there's a nice level of customization that can happen when you add your own pages and your own activities within the system. We talked about local opportunities. Adding calendar events is really simple. So if you've got upcoming job fairs and the like, you can add those in there, and then you can create surveys that are distributed to any students that you want to distribute them to. So these are all really nice little additions to make it possible for you to localize the information that's appearing on the site. Okay, so let me take another quick peek. And it looks like we're okay on questions right now. So to kind of wrap up, again, this is everything I showed you, are all the features that are designed for subscribers. And just I wanted to, for the subscribers on the call, thank you again for supporting the Pennsylvania CareerZone and supporting the upgrade. And hopefully, this gave you a nice refresh on some of the features and getting you in, and I'll share a recording. And if you're still considering the upgrade, this is kind of the summary of why you would potentially think about doing it. I mean, the big one is that you have administrative needs that are connected with career readiness, that you want to, as a school or district, be able to track the career readiness activities that are happening, whether that is activities that are happening within the Pennsylvania CareerZone or activities that are happening outside the Pennsylvania CareerZone, but you pull in using the file management tagging system. That you can run reports on all of this and actually be able to see in aggregate what percentage of your students have the evidence they need, because that's what you're ultimately uploading into PIMS. That makes this easy. The other thing this does is it's keeping this information. When a student creates an account, that student has access to this account in perpetuity, right? So, and they have access to the stuff that they've uploaded for as long as they're using the system. So year to year, this is a really nice way to keep track of things. I think it's not super challenging to keep track of 1 year's worth of stuff, but when we start thinking about, a third grader, there are 2 pieces of evidence, and the fourth grader, then to 2 more, and the 5th grader, there's 2 more there, and you want to make sure that you've got it all in one place. This is a really handy and convenient way to do that. You can have as many administrators in the system as you would like. We will be adding more curriculum to help guide you with your career readiness curriculum. If you want to use one of our off-the-shelf lessons, those are there and they're available. And then single sign-on with Google or Microsoft. And like we said, we just added Clever as well. So that's an integration that's almost complete. So if you want to use Clever, you can do that here too. So those are the reasons you would do it. And roughly the cost or the price you're looking at is about $2.75 a student. And I'm happy to send out a quote on that and to sort of help you out with what that all looks like. So just to conclude, my name again is Blair Dorr. I'm at Headed To. Headed To is the technology behind the Pennsylvania CareerZone. So if you have any questions, want more information on any of what I've covered today, please email me. I'm happy to help. I will pull together a recording that will allow you to kind of access different parts of this presentation. If you want to get refreshed in different things like user management or lesson plans, etc., you can use that. I'll also send out more information on Up the Ladder and the recording we did on that.